Well, hi, Saxophone fans. It's Steve Goodson, and I'm speaking to you from Saxophone World Headquarters. I'm down here in the Command and Control Bunker at the executive offices. We're located in Sector R of the city of New Orleans, the birthplace of jazz. And, you know, I'm that guy that every couple of weeks brings you a little bit of saxophone information at no cost to you. If you don't know who I am, ask your mama. Your mama remembers who I am. You better believe she does. As great entertainment lawyer and outstanding musician Giles Davis, he joined us here. But anyway, tonight's seminar is going to be about something that I know you're doing wrong. Yes, I do, because I've had to deal with too many of you guys over the years. We're going to talk tonight about how to tune your saxophone, because I've been on too many gigs with too many guys didn't know how to do it. And back when we were in the repair shop business in a big way, man, we had all kind of guys coming in. Steve, my horn won't play in tune. My horn won't play in tune. Or, yeah, I know it's an old horn, but man, you know, I can work with it and make it play in tune. Well, sure you can. Hell, I can do that. But here's a question I ask my private students all the time. Should you really be having to burn that many calories to play your saxophone? I don't think so. So let's talk about tuning your saxophone. And if somebody gives us a like, and hey, you can give us some love too. And be sure and share this with your friends and neighbors and families and all that, and anybody I hadn't blocked. So anyway, what is pitch anyway? As I was researching this video, I ran into all kind of information, because how do we know exactly what pitch was in the past? Well, by and large, we don't know up until those guys back in the old corps got around to establishing something as a standard. And we couldn't really be sure until they started building tuning forks and leaving them under old houses or whatever for archaeologists to dig up. And sure enough, we began to find that, you know, starting in the early 17th century or so, was the first time we run into tuning forks, that A, the note A above middle C, was anywhere from 380 cycles per second, according to tuning forks we found, all the way up to 480 cycles per second. And you know, it's really just an arbitrary thing as to where that A is going to be. But as I explored this a little bit, I found some things I really hadn't heard before. And those of you who know me know, yes, I have been to fancy music school, but they kind of glossed over some of this. But anyway, Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, you know those guys, they all played at around A equals 422 cycles per second. And the French, of course, you know, leave it to the French, tell everybody how to do it. In 1859, they passed a law that said that A was going to be 435 cycles per second. Well, that's good. And famous guy who was in charge of the English Philharmonic, Sir George Smart, he in the early 1800s, he was using 432. And then that was known, because we've got a number of tuning forks from that era, and they're all stamped Philharmonic pitch, and that's 432 cycles per second. And then there was Mr. Costa in 1850s. He said, no, that's not high enough, so we're going to go up to around 452. And then Sir Charles Hall, who took over the Royal Philharmonic in 1894, says, look, it's going to be 454. But Queen Victoria, and remember she was the queen and a powerful monarch, liked her band to play, for some reason, the French pitch of 435. During this era, during the 1800s, the European bands were all over the place, mostly higher, around 454 to 457. Now, let's talk about why this is. Anybody who has spent any time as a professional musician knows that when you get to a bigger hall, a larger venue, what so often happens is you kind of lose the sound. It kind of gets away from you. And so these guys, being no fools, said, okay, well, let's raise the pitch. So pitch kept getting higher and higher and higher and higher. Well, the American Federation of Musicians, that's a musicians union, and they bad about telling everybody what to do, of course. They said in 1917 that pitch in the United States was going to be 440 cycles. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, believe it or not, had a paragraph concerning pitch, and they said 440 cycles. In 1939, there was a big international conference hosted by Reich Marshal Goebbels, who was Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, and they agreed on 440. Now, up until this time, the English bands were still playing at 439, but they began to realize that 439 is a prime number, so it's kind of hard to divide it, and they wanted a system whereby when you pick up your telephone and get that dial tone, you old school guys that still got a home landline remember about dial tones. Well, it's 440, and there's Donna Schwartz joined us. She's one of the greatest teachers of all time and my buddy. But boy, she has some great seminars. I'll watch every one of them I can. And so y'all tune in and watch Miss Donna Schwartz, because she's an expert. Okay, now, remember these larger venues which tended to devour the sound, they sounded a little better if we'd up the pitch a little bit, and it gave a little, a little more brilliance to the sound, so it was all right. Okay, along comes the saxophone, and that's where I get involved. Now, I know I'm old, but I wasn't around for those first saxophones that Adolph Sax built, but there were some problems with the tuning of the saxophone as compared to the clarinets and the flutes and the oboes and probably the bassoon. I don't know anything about bassoons, but Chad Taylor's a friend of mine. He does. But so anyway, I teach all of my students, and I think most teachers do, to play the overtone series. And the naturally occurring overtone series with the saxophone, you play, so we don't have to count on our fingers and toes. Let's use the note C. We finger low C, and then we, with our throat, never our embouchure, with our throat, we play the first overtone, which is sort of kind of an octave, except it's a little bit sharp. So we got another C. And then the next overtone is a G above that. And it's even more sharp. And they go on and on and on, and you guys know that. And so us guys who design saxophones and manufacture saxophones need to be paying attention to that at all times, because a large part of that progressive sharpening of the overtone is kind of built into those conical bores we use to give our instruments that sound that's so much like a human voice. Now, something else you're going to notice is if you play the third space C sharp, all open, no trick fingerings now, all open, sounds terrible, doesn't it? Yeah, that's what those of us in the trade call is the wolf note. And Gary Segal, I am honored, Mr. Segal, Very honored you joined. But the wolf note has always been a problem, and we had to arbitrarily decide what it was going to be, and that's the one that we decided it was going to be. Now, listen, as you get on up into that upper octave, designing a saxophone that plays pretty in tune in the lower octave, no octave key, put nothing to it, you know. I've been doing it for about 30 years, but really it's far simpler. The trick is getting that upper octave to be in tune and getting the octaves to match. And I have been struggling with this problem for years, and we built some saxophones that offered some solutions. Still do. I'm going to show you some of them. Let's look at something I did about 1999, and I still love this one. And the one I got here just happens to be the very first one made. Let's see, I don't know if this shows up in the, look at that, my name in big letters, a Unison Steve Goodson model. Now, in the perfect world, the way we have decided to use our music in the Western Hemisphere is we're going to divide that octave, the octave being a doubling of the number of cycles per second, into 12 semitones. Now, the way we divide those semitones is subject to considerable discussion. There are various ways of tempering that octave where you can play with the same instrument in different keys, and that's another complicated discussion that's got math that'll make your eyes glaze over, and we'll get into that another time. But I want to show you this horn right here. Now look, I'm gonna press the octave key, and these guys here on the body, oh, look at that, can you see that? Unless I'm badly mistaken, this horn, your saxophone's all got 2 octave vents, 2, one that's for the notes A and above, one for the notes from G sharp down to D. Jimmy Haig, glad to have you with us. Now let's count octave vents on this horn, which, like I said, we sold a bunch of these in 1999, the other 2000s. It's got a vent up here on the neck, and it's got 2 on the body. 1, 2. So this one's got 3, so it's got 50% more vents than your saxophone, and that's a good thing, because that makes it play a lot better. Now, everybody that's ever played the saxophone knows that those, in the upper octave particularly, you get to play in the high C sharp above the staff, and the palm keys, and man, pitch goes out the window. You got to pay close attention. Well, there was this crazy guy, his name was Steve Goodson. It's on the horn, by the way. But, hey, let me get this where you guys can see. When you press the octave key here, look, you got this bar over here, and it goes around, and what it does, I'm going to turn the horn around. Now, watch this carefully. It partially lowers what we're going to call the C key right here, okay? And there's only one moving part. No springs, no smoke and mirrors, no zigging and dripping. It's even screw adjustable for the amount it opens and closes it. And what it does, if you close that vent just a little bit as you're playing the C sharp and the palm key notes, you can dial those puppies right into tune. Whoa, is that ever cool? And we used to retrofit horns, particularly Selma Mark 6s, with this little modification. And, you know, we'd fabricate up this mechanism. There's some drawings of it on a couple of my websites. You can even see my initial rough sketches, which I think were done on a cocktail napkin in some joint. There's a variation of this mechanism that's in use commonly on some soprano saxes, and that is, they have what we call the donut key. They got a pad with a hole in it right there that goes up and down, but that's too complicated. It is. It's got 2, no, nobody's using this right now, Giles, but if you would come down here and visit me in New Orleans, where you and I could go out and hear some of that good music and have ourselves a drink of good liquor. If you come visit me, I'd show you some prototypes that we are thinking about bringing this back on. But we got another couple of ways we do this, and I'm going to cover that in a minute. But anyway, this works really well. Really well, by the way. This one's cool. Look here. On the front F key, got a roller. It's got a lot of cool stuff. But anyway, that was a good thing. Now, we use a different system today, and this is a Super 400 Series 2. We do the same thing on the Series 1 and the Series 2, but right here by my finger, look at there. What in the world is that? Let's get it a little closer. Yeah, Giles, you're welcome anytime, buddy. You know that. But right here, look here. We've got an upper stack speaker key, and we're the only ones doing this. What does this do? It gives you a little extra venting for the C sharp, for the D, for the E flat, for the F sharp, and the high G. Cause this here horn got key work all the way up to high G. And you may need that high G one day. But anyway, this brings it perfectly in tune, once again, with no springs, no additional moving parts, and that's a very good thing. I hate complicated mechanisms. There's another horn on the market today that I'm not going to call their name because it's made by a good friend of mine, but they got a little key that does sort of kind of the same thing, but it's got, I think, 4 springs. Oh, yeah. You don't know how much Charles Neville's passing hurt me, man, because I never had a better friend than Charles Neville. People used to think that my house was Charles's office when he was in town. Because, Charles, they say, oh, Charles in town? Yeah. And then people be calling over here, like, Steve, is Charles over there hanging out with you? Well, yes, he is. He's sitting right here. All right, now, I promised you we're going to talk about how you tune your saxophone. So let's get on with it. And I'm going to tell you the very first thing that you do wrong. And this is going to be news to a lot of you guys, and write this down. And if you miss it, let me know, because this is the most important thing we're going to talk about today. When you put your horn together and you put the reed on the mouthpiece, before you put the mouthpiece on the saxophone, you got just the mouthpiece in your hand, just the mouthpiece, give it a blow. And look at your tuner. Now I've got some very fine, expensive, fancy tuners, but I swear the one I've got on my phone's as good as some of the ones I paid hundreds of dollars for. But anyway, you got your tuner right there, and see what note you get. And this is the biggest problem in intonation. And I'm going to tell you what these notes you want to have. If you're playing an alto, and these are concert pitches now, you want to get A2. If you're playing the tenor saxophone, you want to get a G2. If you're playing the bari, that'd be a D2, and the soprano, a C2. Now, I promised my good friend, Jim Simonetti, who I love Jim Simonetti. What a great friend and what a master musician. But Simonetti says, I was talking to him about this seminar, I wanted his advice because he's a great teacher. And Simonetti says, you better talk to these guys that are playing soprano. And I sure am, because I see this all the time. Guys will start trying to play their soprano, and they'll forget that soprano mouthpiece needs to cover pretty much the entire cork. Did you hear me? Pretty much the entire cork, or you don't stand a prayer of having that soprano play in tune. And I'm telling you, I see this mistake being made all the time, and I'm glad that Jim Simonetti told me, he said, you better remind these dummies about that, because they ain't never going to play the sopranos in tune. Okay, so we have to start with the correct initial pitch on the mouthpiece. And if you can't do that, go no further. Go no further, because, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't get the correct initial pitch, it ain't gonna work. All right, now, here's another thing goes on that, well, it causes a great deal of discomfort in my urinary tract. In other words, pisses me off. You go into a repair shop, not in mine now. Now here at our shop, we manufacture mouthpieces, okay? And so, yeah, I'm kind of conversant with mouthpieces, and there are mouthpieces all over the place here. But you go in the most repair shop, and the guy that's there has got a mouthpiece. He said, oh, yeah, this is my bench mouthpiece, and I'm going to play test your horn with this bench mouthpiece. And you need to look at some bitch in the eye and say, well, what about my mouthpiece? I mean, isn't the goal for this horn to play in tune with my mouthpiece? I really don't give a rat's ass if it plays in tune with your mouthpiece. I don't. Why would that be? Okay, now I'm gonna spare you guys the 3-hour lesson in physics, but I'm gonna kind of explain it to you in very basic terms. You see, here is a saxophone neck. And if we were to straighten this neck out, it would be somewhat of a cone. Now, full disclosure, it's not a perfect cone with straight sides, but let's imagine it that way. But here at the end, where a cone would ordinarily come to a point, ain't no point. So it's called a truncated cone. Okay, now I will freely admit that when I was in about the 9th or 10th grade in high school geometry class, I was usually taking a nap because I was playing at the Pussycat, a Go-Go, or Charlie Brown's Lounge, or one of them joints all during the week, and then getting up and going to high school the next day. No wonder the cheerleader tryouts weren't too interesting. But anyway, they taught us one day how to calculate the missing portion of this cone. So let's make that calculation of what's missing, calculate the volume of that, and then write that number down. That's going to be important. Now, here's a mouthpiece I was just working on before we went on air today. I'm not through with it, but still got some marks on. But this, here we're going to take the volume of the tone chamber of this mouthpiece, this area right in here. How in the world are we going to do that? I'll tell you how we do that. We plug it up and we fill it with water. We fill the tone chamber with water. And then we pour the water out and we measure that. And then I know what the volume was. And I write that number down. And I compare those two numbers. And the further apart those two numbers are, the harder it's going to be for that horn to play in tune. And I'm telling you, that is the laws of physics in this universe, and don't you try to violate them, because you ain't going to be able to violate the laws of physics. Hey, Brother Ray Mayfield, good to have you with us, my friend. Ray's a good guy, a real good guy. All right, so we got to make sure that our mouthpiece actually matches our saxophone. And this simple mathematical calculation here is why some mouthpieces are never going to work on some horns. They're not. Don't try. It ain't going to happen. So, wise up. All right, now, let's talk about necks. And now this is a Saxophone evolution model neck, and it's got iron nodal weights. And if you look at it closely, you can see that the taper down here is not the same as the taper down here. This thing kind of does that. Now, a lot of times, back when we were running a repair shop full tilt, we would get in there and, guys say, I can't get this old con to play in tune. Or I can't get this old Bush of True Tone to play in tune. What are we going to do, Steve? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to change the taper of the neck. Why would we do that? Because the neck is where the intonation of your saxophone is set. And until we get the mouthpiece matched up and the neck where it plays in tune, then what's the point? You know, go play bassoon or something. Anyway, that's something you got to do. Now, we used to do this. We would get in there and change the taper by flaring a Mike Fortenberry, one of my good friends from high school. He's a good guy, too. Anyway, here's another thing we used to do. Sometimes that tape would be too big, or at certain points it's too big. So what would we do? We would get in there and we would insert a Teflon liner. We use Teflon because none of that gunk you blowing through the horn is going to stick with it. So that's good. So I can change the taper. Now, something we were famous for, and I'm going to be honest with you, this was not original with me. I learned it from the man I've often considered the greatest repairman that ever lived, and that was Mr. Saul Frumpkin. Every time I would go to New York, you know, we'd be playing New York. I said, hell, I got to take the afternoon off. I got to take my horn down and let Saul Frumpkin lay hands on my horn, because even if I just sat in there and talked to Saul for a little bit, my horn played better when I walked out, whether he did anything to it or not. But that guy was fantastic. And something Saul showed me was, he said, Steve, you know these guys, they say Mark 6, Mark 6, Mark 6. Only Mark 6 plays good. Only Mark 6 plays good. What the hell do they know? Well, we can make that Mark 6 play a lot better. And what we would do, here, let me take this other neck over here because it's a little easier to see on. This is a different model that we manufacture. We would take a dent ball that's about as big around as the end of my thumb, and we put it in here, right about where this resonance weight is, and we would say a Hail Mary 3 times and pop that thing and rebound kind of a big old pimple right here on a Mark 6, because that's where the nodal point of D, a 4th line D is. And if I could expand the neck just a little bit, and the easiest way to do it was to rebound a little pimple in there, then suddenly that D's got a good voice and it's a lot more in tune. And that's what we're talking about, is how to get your horn to play in tune. Now, we're going to get around to stuff that you do in a few minutes, but first we got to get the equipment we're working with right. And if the technician you're using, the first tip off, this guy says, yeah, I got a bench mouthpiece and I do everything with a Dukoff Super Power Chamber. Lock your case and run for the door. I'm telling you. All right, now, understand that we can alter the neck, and another thing that we can do, because to a lesser degree, most of the pitch is set in the neck, but to a lesser degree, it's set in the body tube. And occasionally we find that we have to do what we call sleeve the body tube itself to have some prayer getting an old horn to play in tune. Something else that's often problematic, and if you work on many horns and you work on many Mark 6 altos that were assembled in Elkhart as opposed to the French assembled ones, but if you see an Elkhart assembled one, take the bow off and look inside the upper radius. First, they used 3 different bows over the production history of the Mark 6 alto, and never could get the pitch right on the lower notes. But they kept trying different bow lengths and different bow tapers, and in an act of desperation, what they did is, if you look up on that upper radius, you may see that there's a brass something or other about the size of my index finger soldered up inside there. They do it for a lacquered the horn, of course. But what they were doing is changing the taper of that bow because the bow was made in France. They didn't make any bows in Elkhart. But, you know, trying to figure that out. And, yeah, that works. Now, by the way, before we get on to some other things on equipment, and we're going to tell you how to tune now. I ain't holding out, but we're going to tell you. But if you want to like this, or you want to share it with your friends and your neighbors and your side girl or whatever, or anybody that I hadn't blocked, go ahead. We'll have this up on YouTube in a couple of days. I'm going to be real busy tomorrow, so it ain't going to happen. But it might happen Thursday or Friday. But it happens soon, I promise you. This is the annual Jazz and Heritage Festival in New Orleans right now, and I am super, super, super busy. We got a lot of rock stars coming through here, and we having a good time with them. All right, now, people ask me on a regular basis, Steve, I've got this Con Chew Berry. Can you get it to play as in tune as the Selma Series 3, or better yet, Saxophone Super 400 Series 2? Yeah, I can do that. But it may take a lot of work, and one of the things we have to do, you got to be mindful of a couple of things on older horns.